Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Praveena, for introducing me and giving me this opportunity to present something so beautiful. Like everybody already has an introduction from the host. My name is Supritha. I'm a coordinator, tech head, and a social media manager at New Millennium School, Bengaluru. With over a decade across CBSE and international frameworks, but more than any of these titles, I am an educator and a writer who has spent years asking one stubborn question. Why do students remember stories but forget the textbooks? Before I begin, I want you to picture one student's Tuesday. 8:40 a.m., history. She's copying dates about industrialization off a slide. 9:30, the bell rings. She walks 40 feet down a corridor and she's in chemistry, balancing equations that have nothing to do with the century she just left. 10:20, another bell, another room, and now she's diagramming sentences in English. 3 rooms, 3 teachers, 3 completely disconnected universes, and one student, quietly wondering what any of it is for. As educators and administrators, we are constantly battling for attention in an era of rapid digital consumption. And yet, our classrooms often run on the same blueprint we inherited decades ago. Transmit isolated data points, expect memorization, test retrieval. We've upgraded the projector, we haven't upgraded the architecture. Today, I want to talk about a foundational shift in how we design curriculum. Not a new app, not a new policy memo, but a structural one. I want to talk about moving from rote information to narrative architecture. And I want to be precise about what I mean. Because this is not a talk about teaching more literature, it's about borrowing the load bearing structure of story, connection, character, tension, and pause, and using it to make complex, disconnected concepts stick. Every story has architecture, a beginning that earns your attention, rooms that connect each other, a character with something at stake, and silence in the right places so the meaning can land. I'd like to suggest that a well designed school should have exactly the same architecture. Right now, for most students, it doesn't. Let's talk about why and what we do instead. Walk through most school timetables, and what you are really looking at is a floor plan with no doors between the rooms. Our traditional curriculum operates like an encyclopedia. Isolated chapters, rigid definitions, watertight compartments, each subject sealed off behind its own wall. A student walks into history, shifts to science, then moves into language, and rarely, if ever, sees the thread that runs underneath all the three. We've built the school like a series of locked rooms instead of a hallway of a house. And here's the cost of that design. When knowledge arrives with no connective tissue, the brain treats it as disposable. It's not that students can't remember the cause of industrialization or the laws of thermodynamics. It's that nothing in the architecture gave them a reason to file it somewhere permanent. True curricular reformation happens when we stop treating knowledge as isolated data points or separate shelves and start treating it as an interconnected ecosystem, because that's actually closer to how the real world and how memory itself behaves. So let's go back to industrialization, but let's redesign the flow plan. If a student is learning about industrial revolution in history, what if in that exact same week, her science class is exploring thermodynamics and the physics of the steam engine that made it all possible? And what if in the same week, her language class is reading the social commentary of Dickens or the testimony of child laborers from the era, the human cost behind the innovation? Suddenly, she isn't memorizing three disconnected sets of facts for three disconnected exams. She's standing in one room of a house and she can see straight through into the next. The steam engine isn't a diagram anymore. It's the machine that displays the family she just read about. The dates aren't dates anymore. They are the moment human muscle started competing with iron. That's not a richer curriculum. That's the same curriculum with doors finally unlocked. This is the first principle of a narrative architecture. Build the hallways before you decorate the rooms. Here's the second architectural element we borrow from storytelling. And I'd argue it's the one we neglect the most. Every good story needs the protagonist with someone or something at stake. No story works if the main character is a passive observer. Nobody wants to watch a film where the hero reads the pamphlet about the volcano that's going to erupt and goes home. No. We want the hero standing on the mountain deciding what to do before it erupts. Stakes create attention. Agency creates memory. Now ask yourself honestly, who is the protagonist in most of our classrooms? Too often, it's the teacher. The teacher has the information, the teacher has the stakes, the teacher is the one making interesting decisions at the front of the room. And the student is cast as the audience. Taking notes on someone else's story, we've built compelling narratives and then handed the lead role to the wrong person. Narrative architecture asks a different question of every lesson plan. Where is the student's agency? Take a history lesson on the cause of First World War. Flat version. List the causes, memorize them, recite them on the test. The architecture? You are a junior diplomat in Vienna in June of 1914. A telegram has just arrived. You have 6 hours before your ambassador needs a recommendation. What do you advise and why? Same content, same facts. But now, the student isn't memorizing the causes. She's weighing them. Because she has to make a decision and then live with it. The cause of the war stops being a list and starts being the actual pressure she's feeling in her hands. Or take something as dry as water cycle in a primary class. The flat version: evaporation, condensation, precipitation, and collection. You diagram it, you label it, and test it. Done. The architectured version. You're a single water molecule. Tell me the story of your last year. Where have you been? What changed you? What's about to happen to you next? I have seen 10-year-olds write such amazing stories, visualizing themselves as the raindrop. And not one of them forgot the difference between evaporation and condensation afterward. Because they weren't memorizing a process. They were narrating their own journey. This doesn't require theater kits or elaborate role plays. It requires one shift in the way we phrase the task. Stop asking students to describe what happens and start asking them to decide what happens next. The moment a student has a decision to make, even a small one, even a fictional one, they stop being the audience and become the protagonist. And protagonists remember their own story far longer than they remember someone else's lecture. So the second design question for every unit is this: whose story is this? And have we cast the right person in the lead? Let's take this structural thinking and apply it somewhere it tends to get abandoned entirely. Assessment. We can reform examinations into collaborative problem-solving challenges, what I like to call shifting from testing to questing. A test asks, what do you remember? A quest asks, what can you do with that you know right now under pressure with stakes attached? And if the previous section taught us anything, It's that stakes are exactly what turn a passive recall exercise into an experience that sticks. Picture an evaluation framed as a crisis simulation. Instead of a standard pen and paper test, students are handed over scenarios. For example, a local wetland ecosystem is facing a chemical runoff hazard from a nearby industrial site. They have 90 minutes to solve it. They need mathematics to budget a limited cleanup fund, science to analyze the contamination and project its spread, and language skills to write and deliver a crisis briefing to a panel of local council members. Nobody in that room is bored anymore. Nobody is asking, where will I use this? When will I ever use this? They are using it in real time with consequences that feel that even though the scenario is constructed. And this doesn't have to live at the end of a term as a grand finale. Quests can be small and frequent. A weekly 15-minute quest instead of a quiz. You are a city planner with 3 new bus routes to design and a fixed deposit or a budget. Go. That's still testing, arithmetic and spatial reasoning. It just refuses to let the student be a spectator while doing it. What we're really doing here is removing the wall between learning the material and using the material, which not coincidentally is exactly the wall we identified back in section 2 between subjects. Questing is what happens when siloed knowledge and protagonist agencies meet at the same table. The student isn't just connected to other subjects anymore, and she isn't just the lead character anymore. She's both simultaneously solving the problem that doesn't care which textbook the knowledge came from. That ultimately is the goal of any genuine reform. Not better decorated tests, but assessments that look like the actual unscripted world the student is about to walk into. There is one more structural element of storytelling we desperately need in our schools, and is the one we're most afraid of: the intentional pause. In modern education, we treat empty spaces like a failure. If there are 60 seconds left in a period and nothing is happening, we feel like we are wasting it. We fill every second of a 40-minute period, every minute of a school assembly with noise, slides, and more information stacked on top of information. And that hasn't even settled yet. But think about any story or piece of music you've heard, found genuinely moving. The meaning rarely lives in the loudest moment. It lives in the silence right after it. The beat of a quiet after the twist. The rest between 2 notes that make the next note land. Architecturally, silent isn't just empty space. It's a structural support. Remove it and the whole building collapses. There's a long-standing research in classrooms on what's often called the wait time. The simple observation that when teacher extend the pause after asking a question or after delivering a dense idea, the depth and quality of student responses changes substantially. Most of us instinctively give a class about 2 or 3 seconds of silence before we feel uncomfortable and start filling it with ourselves, often by rephrasing the question or worse, answering it for them. We are quite literally the noise getting in our own way. So here's the practice I'd ask you to try. After you introduce a heavy conceptual framework or describe a genuinely difficult historical event, like the partition of a country, a scale of a famine, the mechanics of a moral dilemma, stop. Give the room 30 full seconds of absolute silence. It will feel unbearable, long, and the first time you do it anyway. Let the data settle into actual thought instead of getting trampled by the next slide. A protagonist needs a moment to feel the weight of the decision before making it. A class needs the same thing. I want to add one final structural borrowing because it solves a problem most of us feel every single week. How do we keep a thread alive across lessons, not just within one? Every serialized story, every novel with chapters, every show you've stayed up too late finishing ends its units on a hook, not a summary. The chapter doesn't close by neatly recapping what you just read. It closes with a question. What happens to her next? Did he survive? That unanswered question is what gets you to open the book again tomorrow. Now think about how most of us end our lessons with a recap, a tidy bullet point summary of what we covered. Closing the loop, filling it away, done. We are structurally ending every chapter by telling students the story is finished. Then we are surprised they don't walk in tomorrow curious about what's next. What if instead the last 2 minutes of a lesson weren't a summary but a cliffhanger? You've just taught the causes of a revolution. Close not with, in summary, the 4 causes are, but with, next class, we find out whether the king's final decision saved the monarchy or sealed its fate. Come find out. You've just finished introducing a genetic inheritance. Close with, tomorrow, we find out what happens when the dominant trait isn't actually the one that wins. Same content, completely different emotional exit. This is also where your hallways from section 2 and your cliffhangers start reinforcing each other. A cliffhanger in history that resolves in tomorrow's science class is a hallway with a doorway you've already opened. The student is waiting for it to open instead of discovering it by accident. Continuity across subjects stops being something the timetable imposes and starts being something the student is actively anticipating. You don't need a new curriculum to do this. You need 90 seconds at the end of each lesson spent withholding instead of summarizing. Reforming a school culture doesn't require us to rewrite the national textbook from scratch. It requires us to change the delivery guide, the architecture we build around the content that's already there. As you prepare for your upcoming terms, I'd like to leave you with 4 questions to hold against every lesson plan you write. 1, where is the hallway? How does this lesson connect to what the student is learning in another department this same week? 2, where is the protagonist? Is the student making a decision with stakes or just recording someone else's information? 3, where is the quest? Could this assessment look like the real unscripted problem it's meant to prepare them for? 4, where is the pause? Where is the cliffhanger? Are we giving students room to digest what we teach and a reason to come back wanting more? A house is not defined by how much furniture you cramp into each room. It's defined by whether the rooms connect, whether someone is actually living in them, and whether there's enough open space left to breathe. That's true of buildings. It turns out to be just as true of a 45-minute class. Education reform isn't a top-down bureaucratic shift handed down in a circular or a curriculum. It happens piece by piece in the way we structure our daily interactions with 30 students in a room, in the hallways we build, the lead roles we cast, the quests we design, the silence we allow, and the cliffhangers we have hanging in the air. And that's from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Supritha. Can you stop sharing the screen, ma'am?
Yes.
Thank you. So we have another guest here, Ms. Maria George. Mr. Thomas George and Ms. Maria George, do you have any questions to ask Ms. Supritha?
Hey, Supritha, that was amazing.
Thank you, sir.
And we as educationists around where we gather together and throw in ideas, this was something that we had also discussed, and it's amazing to know that you are looking at it from, you are looking into it. In fact, I would just check. I was just looking at the stuff that we came up with for the sixth grade
Yes.
ICC. For example, if the anchor topic was water, that's what you had mentioned. Of course, what you had mentioned about a water cycle, which is at a much earlier grade. But if you're looking at the anchor topic as water, when you look at the mathematics link or the door to the hallway, it's actually volumes, right?
Yes.
Look at
Yes.
science, it's the water cycle and the states of matter. And if you look at geographies, rivers, oceans, rainfall.
Correct.
If you look at history, it's river valley civilizations. If you look at poems, they have poems on rivers and stories. And
Correct.
ultimately, computer would be creating a poster for water conservation.
Yes.
So that's amazing, actually. I'm excited to know that you're so much a part of that journey.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
I second Mr. George. Ms. Supritha, I have a couple of questions based on the summary of your talk, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Talking about the collaborative quest scenario, how do you assess individual learning in this setup, ma'am?
So when you create a quest in terms of assessment, each of the child, when given a set of information, will assess the situation completely different. Somebody might, for example, let me take the example of thermodynamics that I've given during my talk. So if the child is looking at thermodynamics as working of machines, then there's another child looking at it in the point of view of heat generation, enthalpy, entropy that we talk about in chemistry. So it's just not physics that comes into picture, it's chemistry also that comes into picture. And each child will assess the situation differently, and you have a bunch of different kinds of answers. And an individual learner will know, what I don't know, which part of this question is where I'm stuck with, and where do I need to work, and where do I need help from the academician who's standing in front of me. So in that way, individual learning is also met. So it might be a little extra work for a teacher, but once the system is set, it's running and it's up and going.
Absolutely. So how do you handle curriculum boards that mandate rigid subject separation?
The subject separation can still exist. The content or the topics that needs to be delivered for an academic year still remains the same. We as educators, we have the 10-minute conversation during a coffee break or lunch break and understand what each one of us is doing in a different subject or in a different classroom. So it makes it easier for us to make that connection. We have to find the thread. And that's only 10 minutes at the beginning of the year. Everybody can list their topics. Everybody can just quickly say, I'm planning to do from 1 to 10. Somebody can say, okay, you're starting with 1. That similar topic is chapter 5 for me, so I'll start with 5. No system says that you have to teach from chapter 1 to chapter 10. You have the provision to play around with the way you want to alter the chapters or how you want to teach it. So it comes down to the teacher as an individual to plan on how she wants to deliver it.
Okay, continuing the discussion on the subject separation, Ms. Supritha, what does the cliffhanger look like in a math lesson?
A cliffhanger in a math lesson could be a teacher has just delivered, let's say it was basic number system the teacher has delivered. They are still understanding, in class 4, they're still understanding what a 4-digit number is, what a 5-digit number is. And tomorrow the teachers just says in the last 2 minutes, tomorrow we're going to have a new entrant in your classroom. There's going to be a new member coming into your classroom. Keep thinking of who the new member is. We'll come back tomorrow and discuss. The member doesn't have to be a physical person. It could be just that new addition of number that they're going to learn. This is something very simple, but depending on the topic, depending on the teacher's creativity, we have enough online tools to do that for us also. So we can create more cliffhangers.
Great. So which age group responds best to the protagonist-based approach?
All age groups. We just need to find their favorite cartoon. We just need to find their favorite fictional character, or that BTS, today's favorite Korean drama series. You just need to find that, and then you make that connection. They'll remember it more often. I'd like to share an experience, if I may. There was this one concept I was teaching, and Friends was some series that everybody in my classroom were watching. This was classes 11 and 12 biology. And I used that example to explain. And I remember the boys got a lot more comfortable in my class and explaining and asking me questions related to pregnancy, which is not how a classroom works. So when you're able to connect the shows that they watch or the movies that they watch, automatically it creates interest. They go back and watch and they come back with new questions.
Right. We discussed about handling the curriculum boards that mandate rigid subject separation, right? So how do you align narrative architecture with standardized exam formats?
So none of our formats varies. None of our test varies. The child will still write the exam the way it is expected out of the child, or the way the board expects out of the child. The only thing that we are changing is our delivery pattern. I think what most schools do is, it's a class 10, it's a board batch, or class 12, it's a board batch. Let's just teach them chapter 1 to chapter 20 and be done with it. Read every single line in the textbook, explain it, close it, test them. Instead of just doing that, give them an opportunity to actually wonder, why am I even learning it? Put them in the center of the room. Give them the opportunity to experience what is happening. When they experience what is happening, they retain the information better and they carry it forward. And they start thinking, okay, wait, now I am supposed to be thinking like the brain is supposed to be thinking, not the way our heart is supposed to be functioning. So they differentiate the parts, they differentiate the concepts, and they're able to remember and retain the concepts better because they are the hero. They are the protagonist. It's not me, it's not the concepts in the textbook. So nothing has to change. Only the delivery pattern has to change.
Will it work in with 50 plus students classroom size also, ma'am?
It works even better there because you are keeping everybody engaged. A classroom, when a number exceeds, say, 25, 30, automatically a teacher is in constant thought, how am I going to keep all these young adults engaged in my classroom? If you give each one of them a worksheet kind of a pattern or a printed document with a case, and they are all analyzing individually, or make it a paired activity, or make it a group activity where every member is engaged, every member is a different learner. When we create scenarios, we try to make sure that every learner is also engaged. So automatically everybody is engaged. Your classroom is more noisy because they're all being the protagonist, and they're not being noisy because they are bored or they don't understand the concept.
So how do you measure whether hallways are actually improving retention?
Your question. You've given them a scenario, like the one that I was talking about revolution earlier. You've given them the scenario. While you're giving them the scenario, you also tell them what are the stakes. You list what are the problems that will happen. Now you've given them the stakes, now you've given them the problem. The child has to analyze both. So the child is learning, the child is also able to produce the information even without having to memorize the causes or the problems that they are facing. So assessment, it actually becomes a lot more easier this way. I recently had one of the activities in my biology class where I told them, imagine you are a wind pollinator. Tell me, what is your story? They were able to remember the whole concept even without me investing 3-hour classes for them. I finished giving them brief idea of what each of the pollination was. They were able to come up with stories that lasted 10 minutes each explaining how this whole process works. So the retention, testing, everything is working.
Right. So, ma'am, we spoke about the big classroom.
Hmm.
Each child is unique. How do you handle students who disengage from role play scenarios?
So, like I was speaking earlier, this doesn't have to be a role play.
Okay.
Even the introverts in the classroom have an opportunity to express because they're writing it down. They don't have to step in front of the classroom and explain their thought process. So we're trying to cater to the extroverts who are the more energetic ones who will step forward, who will talk by default when we are explaining a concept. We're also catering to the introverts who don't feel like stepping forward and sharing what they feel unless there is a push from the speaker's end or the teacher's end. So the introverts also get engaged. So your behavioral issue is also tackled because everybody is not bored anymore. They're doing something. And the introverts are also able to participate in the class.
How do you sustain cliffhanger continuity across a full academic term?
We may not be able to, and that is the truth. We might not be able to have a cliffhanger for every concept. But can we finish it at an different emotional note? Yes. You don't have to always summarize rapid. Today we learned this. We don't need to do that. We can just tell them, we discussed this. This is the gist. But what do you think? What do you feel? What do you think next will happen? Leave them with a question that doesn't have to always bring in a new topic, but leave them a question as to what, where, why. They will still be a cliffhanger. Your cliffhangers always doesn't have to bring in a new concept. Your cliffhangers can just be what.
Okay. So, Ms. Supritha, this is the digital era. And do you recommend any tools or templates help teachers design quests quickly?
We have a lot of AI platforms. There are a couple of them that I've been actively using. There is one called as Magic School. There's another called as Teacher Share. These two tools, you just have to blurt out. You don't have to even frame a proper sentence or a concept. You can just tell it, I need to do this. This is my thought process. Can you help me design it? It can actually ask you questions of how your classroom setup is. It will ask you questions of how many minutes do you have? You tell it all of that, it helps you in creating beautiful quests. And every time you use the same platform, you are in awe because the quests look very, very different.
So, ma'am, going back to the same question about each student being different or like having their own personality or the learning approach, how does this approach accommodate neurodivergent learners?
A neurodivergent learner is the best example for this. Most neurodivergent learners, they retain informations in different ways. For example, an autistic child remembers a lot of things in a musical note. So we create a small song around it. While you're presenting, you play a small melody in the background and you speak in a very soft tone. They are able to consume this information better. Your quest may not look like how it would look for a regular learner, but for a neurodivergent learner, the quest might be something that they are able to create their own story of. Give them the information, they create their own story, their own versions. We can always alter what's right and what's wrong or what has to be retained. But for a neurodivergent learner, storytelling is the best way to make sure that they learn the whole concept better. All of us remember movies that we probably watched when we were babies or when we were young, and we still recall a certain moment, a certain dialogue from that movie. We still remember all of that, including neurodivergent students. Neurodivergent students may not remember the exact words, but they will still remember the whole storyline, even without wording it out the way we do it.
Nice. So, coming to the end of the session, ma'am, I have only a couple of questions left. What's the role of the school administration in enabling this reform?
Allow prep time for the teachers. That's all that they have to do. Remove the clerical work that the teachers do. of course, it's all part and parcel of the system, but reduce the amount of clerical work teachers have to do. Automatically, teachers have more time in hand, and they are able to prepare for a concept, a shift of this sort. So they're able to look at it and imagine themselves as the person or part of a certain case or a scenario. They are able to imagine themselves, then they're able to imagine what my child or what my classroom will think about it. Only time is what the teachers need. And I believe that once teachers get that 1 hour, maybe in a day, that's all that they need to sit and think about the possible ways of explaining the same concept. And that's all that is needed from a school administrator's point of view or a management's point of view, time.
Right. So we discussed administration support. What's one small change a teacher can implement starting tomorrow?
Just take that coffee mug, walk into the staff room and have a conversation. Hey, what are you teaching in your class? Let's collaborate. Let's create it interdisciplinary. That's all. That's where you start, and then it progresses. It's an everyday conversation. It's something that you share all along. And year one, it's going to be very difficult. You're not going to like it because you think it's a lot of work. A lot of resentment will come in. But year two, you already know what you're doing. You already know who you need to speak with and how you can interconnect those concepts. So it's just a 10-minute conversation.
Wonderful explanation, Ms. Supritha. Before I end the session, I would like to welcome Ms. Meeta too. Ms. Meeta, if you have any questions, you can unmute yourself and ask the questions, ma'am. Okay. So thank you for that insightful and thought-provoking presentation, Ms. Supritha. We truly appreciate you sharing your expertise on our platform today. I would also like to thank all our participants for joining us and for your time. Before I end the session, anything else you want to mention?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. It's been an amazing time preparing for it and putting my thoughts into a written material and creating the PPT. So, Ms. Praveena, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. This has been fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll end the session now.
Thank you.